At the family reunion, my uncle humiliated me, but hours later, I signed the CEO contract. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment below telling us where you're listening from. We'd love to give you a shout out in our next video. I sat at the long mahogany table in my Uncle Martin's house, the same table that had hosted countless family meetings and power plays over the years. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat and faint hints of expensive cologne, but the only thing I could smell was the tension. My father sat at the far end, his eyes darting to his phone every few seconds, while my mother picked at the edge of a napkin with nervous fingers. My cousins were scattered along the table, whispering in hushed tones, stealing glances at me as if they knew what was coming. Martin leaned back in his chair, his face a careful mask of authority and ease. He was the kind of man who thrived on control, on knowing everyone's place and keeping them there. And today, I had the sinking feeling he'd decided mine wasn't at this table anymore. He cleared his throat, and the whispers died instantly. "Thank you all for coming today," he said, his voice calm and deliberate. "I know these meetings can be tedious, but it's important we're all on the same page about the family's future." His eyes swept over everyone before they settled on me. "Especially you, Ethan." My pulse quickened. I sat up straighter, trying to match his measured tone, even as a cold sweat prickled at the back of my neck. Martin's smile was thin, almost amused. "Ethan," he said, "you've done your best to contribute, but the family has decided that moving forward, your input won't be needed." The words landed like a slap. My cousin stiffened, some looking away as if my shame might be contagious. My mother's hand froze mid-fidget, her knuckles white. My father didn't even lift his head from his phone. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I nodded, my jaw tight. "I understand," I said, though I didn't, not really. How could I understand being cut off from something I'd dedicated years to? How could I accept being told, in front of everyone, that I was no longer part of their future? Martin went on, as if he were reading a script he'd rehearsed a dozen times. "We're streamlining the family investments. It's nothing personal, Ethan. We just feel it's best if you find your own way from here." He folded his hands, a gesture of finality. I stared at the table, my mind reeling. I thought about the late nights I'd spent running numbers for him, the projects I'd taken on without complaint, the loyalty I'd shown even when I wasn't sure he deserved it. All of it meant nothing now, nothing to Martin, nothing to this family. Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. My father finally looked up, but there was no apology in his eyes. Just resignation, like he'd known this was coming and had decided long ago not to fight it. I pushed my chair back slowly, feeling every eye on me as I stood. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, my voice low but steady. My mother looked like she wanted to speak, to reach for me, but she didn't. No one did. I walked out of the dining room and through the hallway lined with family portraits, photos of birthdays and weddings and holidays where we all pretended to be closer than we were. I didn't stop to look at them. I just kept moving, out the front door and into the cool night air, where the taste of betrayal didn't feel quite so bitter. I paused on the porch, taking a slow breath. My heart was pounding, but there was something else there, too, something like relief. They'd made their decision. They'd shut me out. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. I walked down the front steps of my uncle's house, my shoes crunching on the gravel path that led away from everything I'd once called home. The air outside was sharp with the scent of freshly cut grass and summer night, but inside me there was nothing but a cold, hollow ache. I didn't look back at the grand facade of the house, with its towering pillars and polished windows that hid the lies of my family. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I belonged here, only to be cast aside like I'd never mattered at all. As I reached the gate, I paused, gripping the iron bars as if they were the last anchor I had. My mind raced through every memory of the family meetings we'd had here, of the laughter, the raised voices, the unspoken promises that this was my place, my blood, my future. I thought of how, as a boy, I'd sit at the corner of that mahogany table, eyes wide with wonder, thinking that one day I'd be the one at the head of it. But tonight, I'd learned the truth. Martin never saw me as an heir, only as a useful pawn to move around until he didn't need me anymore. I let out a slow breath, feeling the sting of humiliation but also something deeper, an anger that burned cold and bright in my chest. They'd taken so much from me over the years, my time, my loyalty, my hope. And in the end, they'd shown me exactly what I meant to them. Nothing. I pulled out my phone, staring at the blank screen. No missed calls, no messages from my father or mother asking if I was all right. They'd all stayed inside, probably toasting to Martin's decisions, pretending this was just another piece of family business. But for me, it was the end of a chapter I'd spent my whole life trying to write. I turned and started walking, each step feeling heavier than the last. My mind went back to my mother's face, her eyes downcast, her lips trembling like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I wondered if she'd call me later, apologize for not standing up for me. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. My mother had always been the quiet one, the peacemaker who never dared to speak against Martin. And my father, he'd never been more than a shadow at these meetings, content to let Martin's voice drown out his own. I thought about calling them, demanding answers, but what was the point? They'd made their choice, and I had to make mine. I had to decide whether I would let this define me or if I would find a way to rise above it. As I reached my car parked down the street, I took one last look at the house glowing in the soft light of the evening. For years, it had been a symbol of everything I thought I wanted: respect, acceptance, a place at the table. Now, it felt like nothing more than a monument to my own misplaced faith. I got in the car and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was a blur of memories: Martin's cold smile, my father's silence, my cousin's pitying stares. But beneath all that, there was a spark, a quiet voice telling me that maybe this was exactly what I needed. Maybe being cut off was the start of something I'd never dared to imagine. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine's low rumble grounding me. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't let Martin's decision define the rest of my life. He might have cut me off tonight, but he'd also set me free. As I drove away, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a restless anticipation I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time, it was mine to claim. No strings attached, no family name to answer to. Just me, my ambition, and the open road stretching out in front of me. The road was quiet as I drove, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the empty pavement. My mind replayed every word Martin had said, every glance my family had exchanged, as if I was a stranger at their table. But with each mile that passed, the ache in my chest eased just a little, replaced by a steady resolve. They'd cast me out, but that didn't mean I was finished. I'd spent too long trying to prove my worth to people who'd never seen it. Now, it was time to prove it to myself. I pulled over at a small overlook that faced the city skyline, the lights shimmering like distant stars. I stepped out of the car, the night air cool against my face, and let the silence settle around me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. No more second-guessing, no more bending to Martin's will. It was just me and the quiet promise of a future that no one else could touch. I leaned against the hood of the car, staring out at the city I'd spent my whole life in, wondering how it could look so different tonight. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. For a moment, I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Who would be calling me now, in the middle of the night, when the world felt like it had just fallen away? I swiped to answer, my voice calm despite the sudden pounding of my heart. Hello. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker, crisp and professional. Good evening, Ethan. This is Danielle from Orion Holdings. I hope I'm not calling too late. Orion Holdings. The name echoed in my mind, stirring a memory of an email I'd sent months ago, a proposal I'd poured every ounce of my ambition into. I'd almost forgotten about it, buried it beneath Martin's endless demands and my own doubts. But now it was back, like a lifeline in the dark. Not at all, I said, my voice steady even as my pulse quickened. How can I help you? Danielle's tone was warm but direct, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who made decisions and didn't second-guess them. I'm calling to let you know that after reviewing your proposal and discussing your leadership experience, our board has made a decision. We'd like to offer you the position of CEO, effective immediately. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended in the quiet night. CEO. It felt almost unreal, like I'd conjured it out of thin air. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to steady the rush of emotions that surged through me, disbelief, hope, and a flicker of triumph I hadn't felt in years. Are you serious? I asked, my voice low, almost afraid to believe it. I am, Danielle said, her tone unwavering. Your vision for the company, your experience, and the way you approach the proposal. It's exactly what we need. We'd like to finalize everything as soon as possible. If you're available tomorrow, we can start with the paperwork and begin transitioning you into the role. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. They wanted me, not as a placeholder, not as a pawn, but as the leader of something entirely my own. A slow smile spread across my face, the first genuine smile I'd felt since walking out of Martin's house. Thank you, Danielle, I said, my voice steady now, anchored by a confidence I hadn't known I still had. I'll be there first thing in the morning. We ended the call, and I stood there for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. Martin's voice was still there in the back of my mind, telling me I wasn't enough, that I'd never make it on my own. But for the first time, I didn't care. He cut me off because he couldn't control me anymore. And in that space he'd tried to bury me in, I'd found something even better, my own path. I climbed back into the car, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't know what the future at Orion Holdings would look like, what challenges I'd face, what battles I'd have to fight. But I knew one thing for certain, I was done trying to fit into someone else's vision. I was ready to build something that was mine, from the ground up. I started the engine, the quiet hum of the car matching the steady beat of my heart. Tomorrow, everything would change. And this time, it would be on my terms. Morning light streamed through the tall glass windows of Orion Holdings as I stepped inside the building. The lobby was a sea of polished marble and sleek lines, a testament to the company's promise of progress and ambition. My reflection stared back at me from the walls of glass, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the uncertain man who had spent his life trying to please everyone else. I saw someone ready to claim his own future. Danielle was waiting near the reception, her hand extended in greeting. She was as poised and professional in person as she had been over the phone, her eyes sharp but warm. Ethan, she said, her smile genuine. Welcome. We're glad you're here. I shook her hand firmly, feeling a surge of anticipation in my chest. Thank you, Danielle. I'm ready to get started. She led me down a hallway lined with artwork and framed photos of past milestones. Product launches, award ceremonies, glimpses of the company's journey from its early days to now. Every step felt like I was shedding the weight of Martin's shadow, like I was stepping into a world that finally had room for me to grow. We reached a set of double doors, and Danielle pushed them open, revealing a corner office that looked out over the city skyline. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, the view breathtaking in its vastness. My name was already on the door. Ethan Blake, Chief Executive Officer. I walked to the window and pressed my hand against the cool glass, taking it all in. The office was modern and minimal, a place where decisions were made and futures were built. I could almost hear the echo of possibility in the quiet hum of the city below. Danielle stood beside me, her expression thoughtful. You've worked hard for this, Ethan, she said. You deserve it. We believe in what you can do for Orion and for yourself. I turned to her, the weight of her words sinking in. Thank you, I said softly. This means more to me than I can say. She gave a small nod. The board is eager to hear your ideas. They're in the conference room now, ready to discuss your vision for the company. Are you ready? I drew in a slow breath, feeling the last remnants of doubt slip away. I'm ready. The meeting was a whirlwind of handshakes and introductions, a room filled with people who looked at me not as Martin's nephew or a family outcast, but as a leader with a voice worth hearing. I spoke about my ideas, about the future I saw for Orion, the risks I was willing to take, the belief that we could be more than just another name in the industry. And as I spoke, I felt the old fear of rejection fade into something else: purpose. When the meeting ended, Danielle walked me back to my office, her eyes glinting with quiet approval. "You handled that well," she said. "The board is impressed." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, a smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. "It feels good to be seen," I admitted. Danielle gave a knowing nod. "You'll do great things here, Ethan. I have no doubt." When she left, I closed the door behind her and stood in the middle of the office, the quiet hum of the city below like a promise in my ears. For so long, I'd let Martin's voice drown out my own, but now there was only my voice and the wide-open future that waited for me to claim it. I walked back to the window, the skyline stretching out before me. The sun had climbed higher, casting a golden glow across the glass towers and busy streets below. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was exactly where I needed to be. I was no longer the man sitting at the edge of Martin's table, hoping for scraps of approval. I was the CEO of my own story now, and I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me again. The news of my appointment at Orion Holdings spread faster than I could have imagined. By the end of the day, my phone was buzzing with messages from numbers I hadn't seen in years, some from old colleagues who'd once dismissed me as Martin's errand boy, others from distant cousins who'd never spared me more than a polite nod at family gatherings. Each message was a mixture of surprise and sudden, newfound respect, but I didn't bother replying. I was done playing the family game. As evening settled in, I sat in my new office, the city lights winking like 1,000 distant promises. My fingers drummed against the edge of the desk, my mind alive with ideas and strategies. For the first time, I wasn't working for Martin or for anyone else's expectations. I was working for the future I wanted to create. I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the day finally settle in my bones. My uncle had always taught me to play it safe, to keep my ambitions tied to his vision. But now, in this corner office overlooking a city that felt suddenly open and endless, I realized how small his world had been and how much bigger mine could be. I picked up my phone and saw a missed call from my cousin Jason. He'd always been Martin's favorite, the golden boy who'd never had to prove himself. I let the call go to voicemail, knowing exactly what he'd want, to find out how I'd managed to land a role that should have been out of reach for someone like me. Someone Martin had cast aside. I knew the questions were coming, and soon, but I was ready for them. Let them wonder how the man they dismissed as a nobody had become the CEO of one of the city's fastest rising companies. Let them feel the shift in the balance of power, the way the ground beneath their carefully constructed alliances was already starting to crack. My thoughts drifted to Martin, to the look on his face the moment he'd cut me off. I wondered if he'd heard the news yet. Part of me wanted to see his reaction, to watch the realization dawn that I hadn't needed his approval after all. But I didn't let that thought linger. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally stepping into the life I'd been working toward in silence, a life no one else could claim. A soft knock sounded at the door, and Danielle stepped in. She carried a folder in her hand, her expression composed, but her eyes bright with quiet excitement. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I thought you'd want to see this, our first official announcement about your appointment. It's already trending on the company's social channels." I took the folder from her and flipped it open, my breath catching at the sight of my name, bold and certain beneath the company's logo, Ethan Blake, Chief Executive Officer. It felt real, in a way that even the meeting this morning hadn't fully captured. A single page that told the world I was no longer in anyone's shadow. "Thank you, Danielle," I said, my voice steady. "I appreciate everything you've done to make this happen." She smiled, a rare warmth in her usual professionalism. We're lucky to have you, Ethan. And if I may say so, I think you're exactly what this company and this industry needs. I watched her leave, the door clicking softly shut behind her. For a long moment, I stared down at the announcement, my heart steady and sure. Martin's voice had always been the loudest in the room, drowning out everything else. But now, all I could hear was my own determination, stronger than it had ever been. I leaned back in my chair and let the moment wash over me, feeling the first ripple of something that was no longer just ambition, but possibility. Tomorrow, there would be challenges and hard decisions to make. There always were in business. But tonight, I allowed myself the simple pleasure of knowing that I'd already won the first battle, proving that I didn't need their permission to succeed. As the city skyline blinked back at me, I thought about the family dinner table where I'd once sat, trying so hard to fit in. And I realized I'd never belonged there because I was meant to build my own table, one where the only voice that mattered was mine. The sun had set by the time I left the office, the last streaks of gold and crimson fading into the deep blue of the evening sky. I stepped out onto the quiet street, the city alive with its own rhythm, cars weaving through traffic, neon signs flickering to life, and the low hum of people moving forward. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. And for the first time, I didn't feel small in the face of it. I felt ready. I drove to a small restaurant downtown, one of those places I used to dream about visiting when I was younger but never dared to. Tonight, I wanted to celebrate, not with my family, not with anyone who still saw me as Martin's nephew or the black sheep of the Blake clan. I wanted to share this moment with people who saw me for who I really was. I'd invited a few close friends, people who'd seen my struggles, who'd watched me claw my way out from under Martin's thumb. As I walked in, they stood to greet me, their faces lit with pride and excitement. We ordered a bottle of champagne, and as the glasses clinked, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the bubbles. To new beginnings, my friend Sam said, his eyes bright with laughter, and to showing them all what you're made of. I raised my glass, the words catching in my throat for a moment. To building something that's truly ours, I said finally. No more shadows, no more waiting for someone else to give us permission. Just us, our vision, our rules. The toast rang out, and I leaned back in my chair, letting the laughter and warmth wash over me. In that moment, I wasn't the man who'd been cut off at the family meeting. I wasn't the kid who'd spent his life trying to earn a seat at Martin's table. I was Ethan Blake, CEO of Orion Holdings, and that was just the beginning. Later that night, when the restaurant had quieted and my friends had gone home, I found myself alone under the city's glow. I walked slowly down the empty streets, each step echoing with the promise of everything I was about to become. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Martin, short and clipped. Let's talk. I stared at it for a moment before slipping the phone back into my pocket, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. He'd had his chance to speak to me, his chance to shape my future. But I didn't owe him a conversation anymore. The silence between us said everything I needed it to. I stopped at the edge of a small park, the trees swaying gently in the night breeze. I closed my eyes, breathing in the quiet, and let the weight of the day settle over me. In the distance, I could see the Orion Holdings building, its lights still glowing like a beacon in the dark. My building, my legacy. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to prove myself to people who never really wanted to see me succeed. How every rejection had only sharpened my resolve. And I realized that Martin hadn't destroyed me when he cut me off, he'd freed me. He'd given me the chance to become something he'd never imagined. As I turned to head home, the city lights shimmered around me, and I felt something deep in my chest, something steady and unbreakable. I was done waiting for a seat at someone else's table. I was done letting anyone else decide what I was worth. From here on out, I would build my own table, one that couldn't be taken away, one that would stand as a testament to everything I'd fought for. And in that moment, I knew that the day my uncle cut me off was the day I finally found my place in the world. If this story moved you or made you think about the power of forging your own path, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that like button to let us know you're with us. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring more stories like this one to life. Until next time, stay inspired, and remember, the only permission you need is your own.